Thank you, Mr President. My question is to the Minister representing the Education Minister, Senator Birmingham, regarding the leaked proposals for school funding in the Federation Green Paper. The Education Minister has tweeted today, "The Australian government does not and will not support a means test for public education. Full stop. End of story." But the Prime Minister, on the other hand, has said it's a creative idea and was not closing the door. However, I now understand he has ruled this out in question time. Can you confirm the official position of the government on means testing public education?
The Assistant Minister for Education and Training, representing the Minister for Education, Senator Birmingham.
Well, thanks, Mr President, and thank Senator Wright for her question. Mr President, clearly Senator Wright was not listening nor paying any attention when Senator Brandis answered a near-identical question in question time earlier. But if it helps Senator Wright, I can absolutely be clear that we have no intention of supporting any policy that charges wealthy parents for their children to attend public schools. That is not the government's policy. The Australian government does not and will not support a means test for public education. Full stop. End of story. But, Mr President, I do think we're seeing quite a hysterical scare campaign to what is an options paper that is designed to canvass all scenarios. And, Mr President, Senator O'Neill and those opposite can get worked up about it if they like, but they may be wise to heed the words of the South Australian Premier, Jay Weatherill. Because Mr Weatherill said, and I quote, "It's only a discussion paper. We've been asking them to canvass the broader range of options. There's a broad debate going on about Commonwealth-state relations, which is a good thing." South Australian Labor Premier Jay Weatherill. He says it's a good thing that the whole suite of options are being canvassed. That, of course, is not to say that any of those options is necessarily our policy, Premier Weatherill's policy, nor any other government's policy. The debate underway is a full consideration of how the Federation could be addressed, could be reformed, to ensure we have a more effective delivery of education services, of school services in the future. More effective because we are seeing Australia's performance going backwards despite record levels of funding. Record levels of funding going in and performance slipping backwards. That's not good enough, and what we have to address is why that performance is going backwards.
Has expired. Senator Wright, a supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Well, that one's been ruled out. Another proposal in the paper is cutting all federal funding for public schools. Is the coalition really brave enough to go to an election proposing to cut all funds for public education, or can you now also rule out abandoning the 2 million Australian students who attend a public school?
Minister.
Thanks, Mr President. Senator Wright appears to misunderstand what the notion of the Federation White Paper is. This, of course, is looking holistically at all elements of the Federation. This is not a narrow discussion purely isolated to school funding. It is a discussion looking at education, looking at health, looking at tax and revenue. And, Senator Wright, I am quite confident, Mr President, through you and Senator Di Natale, that were any agreement to be made with the states that reformed any element of funding, the states would equally expect they had greater security over revenue streams to offset such funding. The government will not be leaving schools worse off. The government will not be leaving school students worse off. The government will not be leaving public education worse off. We will simply be ensuring we have a proper discussion with the states that deals properly with how we get the best possible management of our schools into the future.
Thank you, Minister. Order on both sides. Senator Wright, final supplementary question.
Thank you, Mr President. Education Minister Pyne is on the record as saying that your government, Minister, that has an emotional commitment to private schools. I'm asking if you have an emotional commitment to public schools, and if not, why not?
Minister.
Oh, thank you, Mr President. We're canvassing religions and schooling today, it seems. But, Mr President, yes, I have an emotional commitment to public schools. I have an emotional commitment to Gawler High School, where I attended. I have an emotional commitment to public schools right around Australia, and I expect to see the best possible outcomes. But, Mr President, it's worth and I'd encourage Senator Wright to read the whole discussion paper. Take a look, because it says spending by all Australian governments grew by 37% in real terms in the 10 years between 2002-3 and 2012-13. Yet we now have fewer high achievers and more low performers than a decade ago. So while how much funding schools get is important, it's not the silver bullet for better results. How it's spent matters more. This government wants to see it spent well, wants to see it spent efficiently and effectively. We're committed to continuing record funding for schools, but we want to ensure that record funding delivers better outcomes, unlike what's occurred in the past.
Has expired.